Today I want to talk about procrastination. Have any of you ever procrastinated on anything? Oh my gosh, right? We all have. And yet when I think about procrastination, I go back to, being in college, right? Waiting until the very last minute to study for an exam, pulling the all-nighter, whatever it was going to take to make it happen. And yet, what is it that made me actually get into activity? Well, it was because there was actually a deadline, right? I just procrastinated getting prepared ahead of the deadline, and I waited until the deadline was so heavy that I couldn't avoid it. And so when I was thinking about procrastination today, I was thinking about, our real estate businesses and how procrastination can affect us, and how often, we leave the most important things to be done last, right? We're getting everything else done before we get to that most important thing. And for most people, that's lead generation. Well, here's what just kind of occurred to me this morning. I was like, wow, here's part of the issue, right? There's no deadline. There's no deadline. There's nothing that forces us to finally get into action, right? Because that little panic attack that we would have as the deadline was looming doesn't exist, right? And so often what ends up happening is we actually we neglect the most important things for the perceived most urgent things. And there's a book out there that's called Eat That Frog, right? Eat That Frog. It's Brian Tracy. It's a skinny little read, maybe 120 pages. It might take you 2 hours, and it's fantastic. And he walks through, 21 ways to beat, procrastination. And the very first three that he says are, number one, he uses the example of a frog, right? If you had to eat a frog, when would be the best time to take a bite out of a frog? And it would be the first thing in the morning. And so he talks through this whole idea around a frog. And here's the three things that I always take from it that are so important. And he says, number one, you have to identify the frog, right? What is that wild, important goal? What is it that really, it would change your world if you accomplished it? And by the way, it usually is something that will impact your world in a really big way. And because there's this perception around it of maybe being uncomfortable, it's not easy, then we avoid it, right? And so we have to identify the frog first. Well, then we have to eat the frog, right? We gotta take a bite out of the frog. And by the way, he says morning is the best time, which is why we say, lead generate in the morning. And so he says, spend at least half of your work hours working on that crazy important goal, that frog. And he says, and then really, here's the key. Just repeat it every day. Repeat it every day. So if lead generation is super important and yet there's no deadline around it, how do you create a deadline around it? Is it that you set a timer on your phone and you turn off all distractions? Is it that maybe there's a consequence that you create by not fulfilling that obligation, not jumping into eating that frog? What could that be? Well, I don't know. It could be different for all of you. It could be that, think of something that, you really don't like, maybe, oh gosh, I was like thinking, I'm such an animal person, so it goes against everything in me to even say this. However, maybe you're not an animal person. And so sending, $5,000 to the local shelter would be like, oh, that would not be something you would do. What is it that you would not like to do? What would be a viable consequence for you? And maybe that's the deadline that you're looking for. My point is, create a deadline, figure out something that's a large enough consequence for you that you actually make it happen. Understand that deadlines are really what makes all of us procrastinators get into action. And what we are lacking around something as simple, because it's simple, not easy, as simple as lead generation, is there's no deadline. There's nothing that forces us to get into action. And one day turns into the next day, to the next day, into the next day. So what is it that you can put into place to create that deadline that makes that little space of anxiety kind of stir up and happen inside of you so that you actually get into activity? You know what? Go onto our Facebook page, the Never Ending Referrals VIP room, and let us know, what is it for you that causes you to stop procrastination and jump into the most important work. We look forward to hearing from you guys. Make it a great day, everybody. Bye-bye.